programme motion to be moved formally?
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. As many of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Sustainable Aviation Fuel Bill. Consideration of Lord's amendments.
I beg to move.
I can inform the House that nothing in the Lord's amendment engages Commons financial privilege. We will begin with the Government motion to agree with Lord's Amendment 1, with which it will be convenient to consider all other Lord's amendments as on the selection paper. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House agrees with Lord's Amendment 1, and I will speak to Lord's Amendments 1 to 6. I am pleased that the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Bill has returned to this House with only a small number of government amendments. I'm grateful to members of both Houses for their engagement and constructive approach throughout the bill's passage. I wish to thank my predecessor, my honourable friend, the member for Wythenshawe and Sale East, for his skilful steering of this bill through its initial stages. I would also like to thank Lord Hendy of Richmond Hill for his valuable support and for leading the bill so effectively through the other place. The Government brought forward 6 amendments, which were agreed to, and we are considering them here today. Let me first turn to Lord's Amendments 1 to 3. These ensure the Secretary of State can only enter into revenue certainty contracts where the supported SAF is produced at a facility in the United Kingdom. Throughout the passage of the bill in the Lords, peers provided thoughtful and collaborative suggestions on this topic, and I'm grateful to them. The amendments to Clause 1 provide that sustainable aviation fuel is to be regarded as UK-produced where any part of the process for converting feedstocks into fuel occurs within the United Kingdom. These amendments give industry a clear and confident signal of support and align with our intended objective of this bill to support the UK's sustainable aviation fuel industry. I will now move on to Lord's Amendments 4 to 6. These amendments require the Secretary of State to consult the devolved governments before making regulations under the powers in clauses 1, 3, 10, or I'll give way in a moment, 11 of the bill. This ensures that devolved governments are fully engaged on matters within their areas of competence, and the clauses that these amendments relate to I will set out very briefly after I've given way to the honourable member.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for that, and very much welcome the leadership this government is taking on this important industry. Can I just ask my honourable friend what assessment he has made as to the amount of sustainable aviation fuel that he anticipates the UK being able to provide, and whether he believes after his amendment has gone through that we're still likely to be depending on importing sustainable aviation fuel alongside those stocks we have in the UK?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. In order for us to be able to meet the provisions under the SAF mandate, we believe it will be necessary to have a mixture of sustainable aviation fuel that is both produced in the United Kingdom and which is imported from overseas. But through this bill, the creation of a first-of-its-kind revenue certainty mechanism to drive what is currently a nascent market to increase the overall provision of SAF production, we believe will have a demonstrable impact in terms of increasing the amount of UK-produced SAF within the system and also producing those good, skilled jobs in our energy industry, which we all care about so much. So I hope that reassures him that we believe that this bill is the right process to go through in order to stimulate this industry, but also to give investors the certainty they need that the UK government stands foursquare behind the creation of sustainable aviation fuel in this country. To turn back to the clauses, Madam Deputy Speaker, to which I was speaking about earlier, these are Clause 1.6, which allows the Secretary of State to make regulations extending the period of time under which they can direct the counterparty to enter into contracts by up to 5 years at a time. Clause 3.1, which gives the Secretary of State powers to make regulations requiring the counterparty to maintain a register of information on revenue certainty contracts and publish details about the contracts. Clause 10.1, which gives the Secretary of State powers to make regulations which require the counterparty to pay a surplus to levy payers and require levy payers to pass on the benefits of that surplus to their customers. Clause 11.4, which gives the Secretary of State powers to make regulations amending financial penalties to reflect inflation and to specify the basis on which a company's turnover is to be determined for the purposes of those penalties. These amendments do not affect the delivery of the bill or its underlying policy intent. And finally, final decisions in relation to the regulation-making powers in the bill will continue to rest with the Secretary of State for Transport. The Government's objective is to implement the revenue certainty mechanism for the SAF industry effectively across the whole of the United Kingdom and to work collaboratively with the devolved governments to do so. I'm grateful for the engagement on this bill from across the devolved governments and pleased to confirm that we have obtained legislative consent with all 3 devolved governments. I therefore commend all 6 amendments to the House and urge members to support them.
The question is that this House agrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1, and I call the Shadow Minister, Greg Smith. I believe it's your birthday. Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I could not have asked for a better birthday treat than to debate this issue with the Minister and with everyone that has shown such a huge interest in this bill this afternoon. When this bill first came before the House, we on these benches were clear that we support the innovation that underpins sustainable aviation fuel. Aviation matters enormously to this country, for families, for trade, for connectivity, and for our standing as a global hub. The challenge has never been whether we decarbonise aviation, but how we do so without damaging competitiveness or pricing ordinary passengers out of flying. From the very beginning, we set a clear test. If the British public are underwriting a revenue certainty mechanism, whether directly or through levies that will inevitably feed into ticket prices, then the economic benefit must remain here in the United Kingdom. That was not an afterthought. It was not something we discovered halfway through the bill's passage. It was one of the central arguments we advanced from day one. Throughout committee and on report, I pressed ministers on how these contracts would work in practice. How would domestic production be prioritised? How would we prevent a scenario where fuel was largely produced overseas, given minimal processing here, and then rebadged as British simply to qualify for support? Because without clarity, that risk was real. My noble friend Lord Grayling brought that concern into sharp focus in the other place. His amendment made the principle explicit. If sustainable aviation fuel is to receive support under a revenue certainty contract, it must be genuinely British. He made the point clearly. We cannot design a system that can be gamed. We cannot allow mostly complete fuel to be shipped here, polished up a bit, and then presented as a domestic product. That would not be an industrial strategy. It would be box ticking with a Union Jack on it. And what, Madam Deputy Speaker, has happened since? The Government tabled Lords Amendments 1, 2 and 4, restricting revenue certainty contracts to UK-produced sustainable aviation fuel. That principle was not explicit in the bill as introduced, and it is explicit now, and I do genuinely welcome that. That change did not, though, appear out of thin air. It followed sustained pressure from these benches and the Conservative benches in the other place. It was Conservatives that identified the gap, made the case, tabled the original amendments, and I am now grateful that the Government have listened and moved. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, the detail matters. The definition of UK produced refers to any part of the process for converting feedstock into fuel taking place in the United Kingdom. That must not become a loophole wide enough to taxi an A380 through. The intention is clear. Real production, real value added, real jobs here. And we will ensure that the practical application reflects that intention. There is also a broader point to these amendments that talks to capability. The United Kingdom has genuine strengths in synthetic fuel and eSAF. We have companies demonstrating 100% synthetic flight developed right here in the United Kingdom. We have world-class engineers and researchers. We have the technical expertise to lead. What we should not have is British passengers ultimately bearing costs while overseas producers capture the opportunity. Now is not the time to relitigate the plus-minus £1.50 on fares argument that we had at previous stages. But I do say for the record that the opposition are watching closely. But will the Minister confirm that they are assured that the non-HEFA requirements contained within the mandate will be met by industry at no more than the same cost to the passenger? With these... of course.
To him for giving way and wish him a happy birthday. I'm interested in what he has to say. I think the government have to be given some credit for bringing forward this signal that pushes the industry, both in terms of the support for the industry to produce here in the UK and also in terms of the mandates. In terms of what he said, can he just clarify, does he actually support the SAF mandate as it is currently legislated, or is he saying he only supports it if it is not going to lead to any additional costs? Can you just clarify his position on that?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, not least for his kind birthday wishes. We do support the SAF mandate. We do support the decarbonisation of air travel, as well as actually other means of travel, but it has got to be done so in a way that is economically viable, not just to the industry, but to all of us who ultimately pay to fly or to go on a train or a ship or whatever it might be through the fares we pay. And that is why the opposition has been so laser-focused on the direct impacts on fare payers as well as to the wider industry, and to the wider point, and to get back to the amendments we are actually debating, to ensure that the economic value of that decarbonisation that the British state is mandating through the legislation we pass in this Parliament actually benefits British producers, British researchers, British engineers, and the incredible array of innovators and talent we have here in this country. With these amendments, the bill is closer, Madam Deputy Speaker, to meeting the test we established at the beginning of the first debate, that the sustainable aviation fuel policy this government is pushing should reduce emissions while reinforcing the UK's industrial base, safeguarding competitiveness and supporting high-skilled employment across the country. Indeed, our position remains clear. Environmental responsibility, along with economic realism, that will be what protects competitiveness. We will continue to scrutinise the framework carefully as it develops, but on the fundamental point that British passengers' money should back British production, the government has adopted the Conservative position. Perhaps if they'd listened to us a little more often, they might find the turbulence a great deal lighter.
Oh,
Yeah. OK, follow that Lee picture.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do wish the honourable gentleman a very happy birthday. I'm sure the rest of the benches are waiting for you at the party. I know you like those. How was that, Madam Deputy Speaker? Current events in the Middle East have once again demonstrated the volatility and the vulnerability of global fuel supplies. The cleaner aviation sector should also be a more resilient one, and producing sustainable aviation fuel at home reduces exposure to the geopolitical shocks while giving airlines and passengers greater long-term certainty. And it's for this reason that I believe the Lord's amendments today are so vitally key, because this is about our home and this is about our circular economy. Yeah. Before Parliament, I worked in the water industry for 30 years, and one of the projects I led was working with farmers on practical measures to prevent flooding, including planting winter cover crops in between pea harvests to protect soil and reduce runoff. Those same winter cover crops, or similar ones, can also play a role as feedstock for sustainable aviation fuel. And that is why I see a real opportunity here to line up the environmental improvement and the economic benefits that come from SAF. Better soil structure and less erosion means better outcomes for our local waterways, and a healthier local environment, while farmers and rural communities can gain an additional income stream from doing the right thing for their land. And after coming to Parliament, one of the biggest goals has been for me to see Doncaster Sheffield Airport reopened. It is essential to local jobs, to growth and to prosperity, but I want to go further still. I want Doncaster Sheffield Airport to become a beacon of cleaner, greener aviation, and sustainable aviation fuel is a huge part of that transition.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
I most certainly will.
Thank you. I thank the Honourable Member for giving way and for the speech that he's giving. And does he agree with me that the reopening of Doncaster Airport is not only critical so that we're part of the sustainable aviation future, but it also creates those high-skill, high-wage jobs in the green economy which young people in Doncaster deserve?
Yeah, thank you. I thank her for her intervention. I would certainly agree, yes. When I look at the business case for Doncaster Sheffield Airport, the SIMCA, the South Yorkshire Mill Combined Business Case, says around about 5,000 jobs will be created directly and many, many more indirect jobs. And when I go to schools, like she has, I see our future pilots, I see our future engineers, I see our future in manufacturing, I see our future aircrew. And do you know what? I want people to live in Doncaster, work in Doncaster, have their careers in Doncaster, spend their leisure time there, and basically have the passion for the place that I do, and I know that she does too. And DSA, for me, is ideally placed to lead on how we become a cleaner, greener aviation economy locally. It's surrounded by agricultural land and close to the Humber, the UK's leading hub for green energy and for fuel. A domestic SAF industry means more UK manufacturing, more skilled work, and more investment in the kind of modern facilities that can power regional growth. And we know how important that is right now. Now, taken together, the benefits are absolutely clear. For our countryside, we can improve soil and water outcomes and support more resilient farming and restore nature. For our rural communities, we can open up new opportunities, diversify incomes and improve productivity. For industry, we can build manufacturing capability and secure supply chains here at home. For aviation, we reduce dependence on volatile foreign oil and give the sector a credible route to decarbonise. And globally, we reduce the carbon impact of air travel, which is exactly what we need to do if we're going to meet our climate goals in a way that supports jobs and prosperity and secures the planet for our children and future generations. This is the right approach for our industrial strategy that is serious about delivery and an environmental strategy that is serious about our future. Now, if we are asking the public to help de-risk and scale up a strategic fuel, then the jobs, the investment, the apprenticeships, the manufacturing capacity should be created right here, right now, in the UK. These amendments keep the value chain onshore, strengthen British supply chains, and make sure decarbonisation supports growth in our communities, not just demand somewhere else. Thank you.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Olly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And even taking into account these amendments, we continue to welcome steps to decarbonise our aviation industry, including investment in sustainable aviation fuels, but repeat our point from the second reading debate that SAF is just one step in that direction, and longer term it needs to complement rather than detract from investment in zero carbon flight technology. Now, in bringing these amendments forward, I do want to thank the Government for their engagement in the other place and the work of the noble Baroness Pigeon in her advocacy for strengthening this bill. And to that end, we support all of the amendments. Amendments 1, 2 and 3 helping to provide a revenue certainty that can only relate to UK-produced aviation fuel. Amendments 4 and 5 that will simplify industry consultation requirements, noting some of the ways that Amendment 6 will bring in an overarching consultation requirement. And we support the duty placed on the Secretary of State via Amendment 6 to consult before making regulations under the Act, including its focus on consultation and engagement with devolved administrations, which of course is always important. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I conclude my remarks, and I can only regret that I lack the Shadow Minister's skills in aviation puns.
OK, Toby Perkins.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome this bill, which will boost homegrown production of sustainable aviation fuel, and also welcome work done in the other place on this bill, and believe the amendments strengthen the bill. My honourable friend should be heartened by the fact that the amendments that he is presenting today aren't being lambasted from all sides, but instead everyone's seeking to claim credit for them, which is a nice place for him to be. And the Conservative Party are characteristically joining the list of things that they now call for that they had 14 years to do but didn't do in the time that they were in power. But I think, nonetheless, I welcome the comments of the honourable gentleman. I happily give him the opportunity on his birthday.
The honourable gentleman for giving way. I appreciate that, yes, he is correct. In our time in government, we did not pass the legislation. No government can do everything in its time in power. Will he at least accept, as we are having a fair debate here, will he at least accept that an enormous amount of work was done by the previous government that led to the ability for this government to bring forward this bill so quickly in the first session of this Parliament?
Neither confirm nor deny what he's saying. Frankly, I'm not certain. I'm not certain about that. He may well be right, and I wasn't seeking to create great division on this. But I do think that my general point remains, nonetheless. As I say, I thank him for what he said and his support of this. And let's not got plenty of things to argue about. Let's not balance on the head of a pin on this area where we're all agreed. Now, the government is clearly committed to greater aviation expansion, and the recent work of my committee, the Environmental Audit Committee, has demonstrated, firstly, that it is possible to achieve the government's ambitions to have that growth whilst protecting nature and the environment. However, it has also demonstrated that it is not by any means inevitable, and that sustainable aviation fuel is one aspect that must play a growing role alongside a suite of other measures if the government is going to reduce carbon emissions from aviation whilst driving that passenger and economic growth. And it is absolutely crucial that moving forward we see the government taking action not just on sustainable aviation fuel but on alongside many other elements that will be necessary not only to keep the government's promise but I would say to keep them out of the courts, keep them out of being judicially reviewed if they don't achieve that. So it is important that this is one of a number of measures. Now, this government's given a really important commitment to meet its climate change and environmental targets at the same time as expanding airports and growing the economy, and I very much welcome that. Was that he was seeking to Thank you, honourable member, for giving way on that point. He rightly points to the need for a suite of measures to deliver the objectives of this bill and the overall reduction in fossil fuel usage by the aviation sector. One of the means of doing that is, of course, massively ramping up green hydrogen production, which will have to happen over a number of years. And I'm sure the honourable member for Falkirk, who I've seen bobbing, will no doubt point to that. But a quick way to kickstart that marketplace and to boost sustainable aviation fuel would be to increase the amount that can be injected into the gas grid of hydrogen to 20%, and the evidence is there to say that would work. But that would act as a massive kickstart for the industry. Does he agree with that point? Interesting point that the honourable gentleman makes. I think it is something that's definitely worth considering, and I thank him for that contribution. Now, the government has given, as I say, this important commitment to meet its climate change and environmental targets at the same time as expanding airports and growing the economy, and I welcome that commitment. And it is a hugely important promise, but it is also a huge challenge. Sustainable aviation fuel can deliver emission savings compared to traditional kerosene fuel. Increasing its use is a vital piece of the puzzle in decarbonising aviation. The revenue certainty mechanism introduced in this bill will provide that minimum price guarantee for producers of SAF in the UK. And so I welcome whoever was responsible for it. I welcome these amendments. Now, the price certainty will encourage investor confidence in bringing commercial scale SAF plants to the UK and bringing SAF production and jobs. Alongside alongside that revenue certainty mechanism, the government has introduced a SAF mandate, a legal obligation on fuel suppliers to the UK to provide increasing proportion of SAF to airlines, and this policy is also essential to driving the uptake of SAF. Can I ask the Minister what assessment he has made as to when he thinks these SAF mandates will be achieved? Does he think they'll be achieved in the next year? And if not, at what point does he expect those mandates will be met? Given that the government has said that they don't believe that there is a need for us to follow the advice of the Climate Change Committee and see demand management alongside the suite of other measures as one of the approaches that they take, and instead believe we can get greater amounts of sustainable aviation fuel. Can my honourable friend tell me how important he thinks it is that we see the industry achieving these early mandates if we want to give confidence that they are going to be achieved in much greater numbers in the future? Despite these welcome policies, the Environmental Audit Committee heard evidence, and I think the Minister confirmed that today, that the UK would not be able to provide sufficient SAF to service the level that the government expects the industry to use. And we know that imported SAF is not currently recognised in UK carbon budgets as being a genuine reduction in emissions. I understand the government has plans to include international aviation emissions within its carbon calculations, but the UK has yet to formally legislate to include those international aviation emissions within the carbon budgets, despite both this government and the previous one agreeing to do so previously. So can the Minister confirm that the government will make prioritising parliamentary time to make that available, to introduce the necessary legislation to formally include international aviation emissions within the UK carbon budgets? And the Environmental Audit Committee also heard evidence at the Whittle Laboratory, Cambridge University, that whilst moving to around 25% of fuel usage to SAF would offer certain and substantial emissions reductions, beyond that point, the reductions become much less certain, because what happens as you move more and more towards SAF is that you potentially push up the price of SAF in terms of its competition with other sectors, and it leads to the potential for reducing availability of feedstocks for other sectors and moving beyond utilising waste products and towards having to grow and cut down crops purely to serve the aviation sector. So that beyond 25%, if you start aiming to 50, 60, 70%, then the certainty of this being an environmental and carbon reduction becomes much less certain. So I wonder what assessment my honourable friend has made of that research, whether he's visited the Whittle Laboratory. I had an opportunity to listen to their modelling on this, and if so, what he made of it. And finally, can the Minister reassure me that he won't allow SAF production from feedstocks, potentially undermining the environmental sustainability and the emissions savings of SAF? And also whether he has had any discussions with his right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Department of Energy, Security and Net Zero, around the likely needs for the very same stock as part of our energy production in the future, particularly given the potential growth of data centres, and whether we have, as a government, a collective approach to both the need for sustainable aviation fuel and the need for biofuels servicing our energy sector. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll bring my comments to a close.
Marvellous. Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. You've taken me by surprise by not picking me last. So,
sometimes change your mind.
I want to start by thanking the Minister for opening this debate and of course thanking the Shadow Minister for his comments, and particularly to wish him a very happy birthday. Without wanting to get into any sort of party political back and forth, I actually feel, having been part of the Bill Committee, that it was a really productive Bill Committee in which all members from all sides of the House really came together collaboratively, because we all want this to be a success. And no least my honourable friend for Wythenshawe and Sale East, who saw this bill through the committee stage and was a huge driving force in ensuring that this gets on the statute book, and we will see the benefits of it. I'm being a little bit naughty, Madam Deputy Speaker, which I know is rare for me, but I particularly wanted to speak because I was on the Bill Committee, and it was one of the first Bill Committees that I've sat on in this place, and I saw it through the entire stage, from first reading to committee stage, only to miss third reading due to being on paternity leave. And I think probably, Madam Deputy Speaker, on this occasion you will agree I got my priorities right. However, as the bill has returned to this chamber as part of the consideration of the Lord's amendment, I wanted to speak about how genuinely excited I've been to be part of the process and the difference I believe it will mean, not only to the aviation industry, which is hugely important to my constituency of Harlow. As I've mentioned before in this place, my constituency starts very much at the end of the runway of Stansted Airport. And if my honourable friend from Wythenshawe and Sale East was here, he'd point out that Stansted Airport is part of the Manchester Airport Group. So I'm doing him a service by mentioning that. But not only will it make a huge difference to people in my constituency, over 100 people from hundreds of people from my constituency are employed at Stansted Airport, but also the huge links that Stansted Airport College has with Harlow College. And I think there was one of the speakers earlier spoke about when he goes into schools, he sees the young people and sees them being the cabin crew and the pilots and the ground staff of the future. I've had the pleasure of visiting Stansted College. I did let the member of the opposition know I was entering into her constituency, and to see the huge difference that made to young people. And we're not just talking about jobs here, we're talking about careers, we're talking about occupations, really high-level jobs. And I'm really pleased that we're going to see 4,100 more jobs at Stansted Airport because of the expansion of that airport. I'm not expecting all of those 4,000 people to come from Harlow, although I have put in a request with Manchester Airport Group, but that would be nice to see. But also we know the difference that this sustainable aviation fuel bill will make to the environment. Now, there are naysayers who will tell you that the increase of SAF production is not the answer, and that we need to decrease the amount of people that fly. But I think we've got to be realistic about that. As I've said before, the expansion of Chesterfield Airport will mean additional 4,000 jobs for my area of the country. Aviation supports business travel, freight for millions, but SAF will also help to deliver on the clean energy and growth that is so important to this government. We know that reducing over the lifetime of its use, the use of SAF will reduce greenhouse gases by 70%. I think that's something that we can all absolutely get behind. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know I'm expected to speak about the amendments. So I will briefly touch upon Lorne's Amendment 6 and say that I'm confident that the Secretary of State and the Minister, of course, will continue to consult with those who she and he considers appropriate ahead of any legislation. And I'm very reassured to hear the Minister say that he's already engaged and got support from the devolved nations on this particular matter. But can I ask the Minister to reflect on the comments made by the previous speaker about how the use of SAF production can be part of the government's wider aims, and the conversations he's having with energy ministers about the wider aims to get to net zero and actually decrease our carbon usage, but also to get to that green energy that is so important. Because when I go into schools and meet the pilots and the cabin crew and the ground staff of the future, the number one thing they talk to me about is their concerns about climate change. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, it has been a pleasure to be part of this process and see this bill through Parliament. a clear sign that this Labour government not only recognises the importance of our aviation sector for the future of young people, but also for business and international trade, but also the importance of green energy solutions to actually ensure that this country and the world has a positive future. Although I missed, this is the joke coming, although I missed third reading, I am glad to be here for its final descent towards royal assent.
Euan Stainbank.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a fellow member of the Bill Committee with my honourable friend from Harlow, I welcome the return of this bill. Its progress is an example of the common sense approach from this Labour government. With airport expansion and infrastructure expansion, such as perhaps Glasgow Airport rail link, necessary to support growth in every corner of the United Kingdom, the need to decarbonise the sector without pricing the ordinary Brit out of their holiday, the government's approach to aviation and this bill has been the right one. While some absent from the opposition benches seem keen to condemn aviation and its economic benefits to the historic dustbin, this bill takes the right approach. It will aid the government's growth commitment to the aviation sector, alongside progress being made on airspace modernisation. Now, the Minister knows the constituents across Falkirk District, specifically those from my honourable friend and constituency neighbour for Bathgate and Linlithgow, are very interested in this area, and I would appreciate if, considering all the compliments I'm about to pay his department's work and the interest in sustainable aviation fuel in Grangemouth and the burgeoning green hydrogen industry that the member for Moray West, Nairn and Strapsay, I believe, was referring to, he would perhaps consider a trip to the Falkirk District, as well as the conveniently equidistant Edinburgh and Glasgow airports in the near future. Now, returning to the amendments for consideration, as has become starkly evident over the weekend and early this week, industrial security is national security. I've previously stated that we must scale up urgently domestic SAF for the resilience of our fuel supply chains. We have world-leading research and development already in the works in the UK, with the Lighthouse Green Fuels project on Teesside and Project Speedbird in North Yorkshire. However, we must scale up faster across the country if we are to stimulate a mix of native SAF in the production that the Minister stated as his ambition. The principal challenge raised by investors in the aviation sector is that there is not sufficiently natively refined SAF to fulfil the mandate now, or as it scales up to 2030. This mechanism will enable its production here, but we must identify alongside investors where it should be produced and at what scale. When Petroineos chose to close the over century-old Grangemouth oil refinery last year, that caused many fuel security concerns in my community and across Scotland, distinctly that there was no native jet fuel production in Scotland for our aviation sector. The Government should urgently assess the utility of the industrial complex at Grangemouth. This ambition would be supported by the Prime Minister's £200 million national wealth commitment to our community and Project Willow's identification of 2 SAF projects. I lobbied for and welcomed that commitment from the Prime Minister over 12 months ago, and it has crowded in substantial private investor interest, but it must start converting into real industrial projects at Grangemouth. We have the public commitment, we have the incentives for private investment, and we must seek to expedite interest and investment in SAF production at Grangemouth. Now, on engagement with devolved governments, which one of the amendments referred to, I keep a copy of the co-funded Project Willow in my top desk drawer. And one of the proposals which is recommended is the prospect of a HEFA SAF production site bringing up to 120 jobs into Grangemouth. Now, the policy recommendations from that proposal were that the UK Government should consider a HEFA cap exemption for domestic feedstock and seek a delay to HEFA cap implementation. Now, my honourable friend sitting next to me, the Minister's predecessor, was clear regarding the Government's balanced decision regarding the HEFA cap that would not be reviewed following Project Willow. But on that basis, could the Minister confirm, in lieu of any of these policy recommendations, will the Government now redouble its efforts to engage with prospective investors in SAF technology in Grangemouth? The e-methanol and methanol to jet project recommended in Project Willow comes with a projected up to 270 jobs in a co-production process. Considering the Lord's amendment seeking to strengthen native production, what assurances can the Minister give me that the Government will seek to maximise the jobs involved in the conversion of feedstock into unrefined fuel across Scotland and broadly across the United Kingdom? As I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, at second reading, this is tremendous legislation, and I welcome the Minister today getting over the line. Well, the industry's view is that the previous government left this on the shelf for too long, with a year between the announcement and the initial consultation, and while many on the opposition benches continue to provide abstract musings about the future of this critical sector or fret about negligible impacts on short-term ticket prices, it is to the immense credit of the Department and the Ministers that the government has got on and delivered this bill, which backs British jobs, British industry and secures the sustainable future of the Great British Holiday. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Melanie on.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to support the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Bill and the Lord's amendments before us today. This bill is about backing a world-class aviation sector, supporting its growth and doing that in a way that meets our responsibilities on decarbonisation. SAF could contribute to 65% reduction in emissions needed by aviation to meet net zero by 2050. A very useful reminder that technological development ensures a future for higher carbon emitters whilst improving our environment. That is policy in action to reduce disruption to consumers, something that we also have to bear in mind. SAF matters not just for its decarbonisation credentials, but for its clear potential to support job creation and economic growth, and also, interestingly, demonstrated by my honourable friend, member for Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme, bringing into existence a sense of a circular economy whereby we have flooding alleviation and the development of feedstock supply, perhaps alleviating some of the concern that the honourable member for Chesterfield raised about the source of that feedstock. Increasing homegrown SAF production can position the UK as a leading destination in this new market, with low carbon fuels supporting up to 15,000 jobs and contributing up to £5 billion to the economy by 2050. That's not an abstract prospect for those of us representing communities built on industry and energy. In northern Lincolnshire, we already see what that can mean. Phillips 66 Humber Refinery in Immingham, my neighbouring constituency, is the UK's first and largest commercial scale producer of SAF. I was pleased to discuss the potential for expansion of SAF operations with P66, especially given their recent acquisition of the Lindsay Oil Refinery site, with its uniquely placed direct pipeline to London Heathrow. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's of utmost importance that UK refineries like P66's Humber Refinery play a crucial role in the transition and upscale of cleaner fuel sources, retaining the domestic skills base and supply chains that communities like mine depend on. That's why I particularly welcome Lord's Amendments 1 to 3. Ensuring the Secretary of State can only enter revenue certainty contracts where the supported SAF is produced in the UK is a crucial step in protecting domestic industrial growth. Given recent global events that other colleagues have referred to, these amendments present straightforward, sensible safeguards, helping the UK to build fuel capability and resilience in an ever-volatile global fuel supply chain. Madam Deputy Speaker, for SAF to be a success and as we build this market, we must get the wider policy framework right, including carbon pricing and the UK emissions trading scheme. ETS can support sustainable aviation fuel investment, but it needs to be negotiated with care so British industry has clarity and confidence to invest for the long term, rather than facing uncertainty or any unintended disadvantages. So to conclude, I want to just support the bill, welcome the Lord's amendments and look forward to working with government to strengthen the link between ambition and real industrial opportunity here at home, creating jobs and career opportunities in communities like Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes.
Tom Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recognise that a few of my colleagues have been offering jokes. I wasn't able to prepare detailed remarks to this, so I hope you'll forgive me if I just wing it. It hasn't been said yet in this debate, while we have discussed decarbonisation a number of times, that this is about addressing the climate crisis, and that is an incredibly important and urgent piece of work that demands our utmost urgency and ambition. For that reason, I naturally support this bill and what it's trying to achieve. And we've seen similar mechanisms be incredibly successful in developing the thriving renewables industry we now see in the UK, providing a lot of our energy. I think it's worthwhile recognising that this bill is part of a much longer journey to decarbonising aviation. I'll declare an interest early on in my remarks as chair of your party parliamentary group on hydrogen. In the very long time frame, we can see aviation potentially moving to cryogenic hydrogen as a fuel source, and we should keep that in view. Similarly, though, as we navigate SAF, that also has various generations of development as we look at different feedstocks, different mechanisms of production of the fuels, and actually different characteristics of those fuels as well, and how they interact with gas turbine technology. Therefore, the devil will absolutely be in the detail in the mechanisms the government now puts forward to actually build a market for the various different generations of SAF. And I hope that we will see more detail around that strategic approach as this legislation goes forward. It's very important, as these amendments make very clear, that the UK benefits from what we're doing here. And I am very passionate about seeing the whole UK low-carbon energy supply chain building and scaling rapidly. That includes electrons, and this government already has very ambitious goals around decarbonising electricity, but it also includes molecules. And hydrogen, we're still awaiting the hydrogen strategy. I've spoken to the Minister about that recently, and I understand it is very close. But it is incredibly important that we have an ambitious and comprehensive strategy for the development of hydrogen economy in the UK that doesn't just serve a small number of industrial clusters, but underpins our decarbonisation of electricity, provides dispatchable power, and provides an opportunity for industrial renewal as we move forward. Hydrogen is an important feedstock for producing SAF by any route. We need a hydrogen economy, and for that we need a price, and for a price we need storage and transmission. And so I'd just like to make the point really that as we fulfil our ambitions for SAF to be ambitious, bold and effective in decarbonising, we also do the work as a government to build a hydrogen economy to establish that anchoring price as well as demand and production so that we can see absolutely a thriving aviation sector that's decarbonising, but in fact the whole UK industrial sector renewed, regenerated, seeing an absolute renaissance underpinned by low-carbon energy, both electrons and molecules.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It would be remiss of me not to start by saying with leave of the House, and then after that to wish a very happy birthday to the Shadow Minister. I was in fact so keen to wish him a happy birthday, I nearly put a foot wrong when it came to parliamentary protocol. I had the pleasure of celebrating my birthday as part of the Railways Bill with his honourable friend, the member for Broadland and Fakenham, and may I say it was raucous, as I'm sure the Right Honourable Member for Melton and Syston will attest to. I thank him for his support for the Lord's amendments. And for his fulsome support for the principle of decarbonisation of aviation. I must say I'm starting to receive slightly mixed signals from the Shadow Transport team as to just how passionately they stand behind this prospect across different modes of transport, but it's perhaps one to be hashed out over a beer at the Honourable Member's birthday celebrations. I'm glad he agrees with the government amendments on this point. He is right to point to the economic value of decarbonisation being felt across the United Kingdom and the need to focus on value for money for taxpayers. We are committed to delivering this in the RCM by controlling the scale and the number of contracts that are entered into, as well as the prices that are negotiated in each contract. The cost of the scheme and the impact on passenger ticket prices, I can assure him, will be kept under continual review. And I don't just acknowledge his commitment to be vigilant on this issue, I do actively welcome it, and I thank him for his contributions. May I also very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, just acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Member for Wythenshawe and Sale East, my predecessor. I've already thanked him for his work on this bill, but he wasn't in the room, so I'd just like to take this opportunity to restate my thanks to him for getting this legislation, this crucial legislation, to where it needs to be. Turning to the remarks from the honourable members for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme and Doncaster Central, they were all right to focus and say that the benefits of SAF production must be felt in my home of Yorkshire, but in Lincolnshire and across the United Kingdom. And I think also this point about Doncaster Sheffield Airport is important, because I believe that the consumers who use our airports and seek to use aviation travel to connect themselves to the world also care that they are able to do so in a form of technology that the government is doing its utmost to try and decarbonise. So I'm glad that they feel that that level of ambition is reflected both in these amendments and in the bill as a whole, and that's something that the honourable member for Harlow pointed to as well. The Lib Dem spokesman was right to say that SAF is only one piece of the puzzle in aviation decarbonisation. Hydrogen flight, GGRs, airspace modernisation all require focus, and these points were also raised by the members for Chesterfield and Worcester. The member for Chesterfield asked me about the concerns around crop use in SAF. Currently, crop use is not part of meeting. Crop-based SAF won't be eligible for the SAF mandate, but a call for evidence on this subject is open and closes on the 16th of March. More broadly, the member for Chesterfield asked me a range of questions that were quite detailed, some of which lie outside the exact scope of these amendments. So I would be grateful if he would write to me and set them out so that I can give him the fulsome response that he requires. I thank the honourable member for Harlow for his contribution. He's right to point to the skills benefit of the generation of a thriving UK SAF industry can bring to his constituents in Harlow, and also support the work at Stansted Airport. My honourable friend, the member for Falkirk, also raised the really important point of ongoing questions surrounding the Grangemouth refinery. I would reiterate, as he asked me to, that we are calling on investors to come forward and join us in what is a major opportunity to secure the long-term industrial future of Grangemouth as a hub for our clean energy future. With government backing, we believe that now is the time for private sector partners to step forward and help shape the next chapter for Grangemouth. The National Wealth Fund stands ready to invest £200 million to support those new opportunities, and I would encourage him to keep working with us, and we are ready to engage with investors on that point. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the contributions made by members from both houses and the industry stakeholders. These contributions have helped develop a regulatory framework that we believe balances ambition with pragmatism. I would also, if you would allow me, just like to thank the many civil servants in my department for their thoroughness in preparing this bill. In particular, Rachel, Jen, Dale, Shan, Maeve and Sania, who've all worked fantastically hard to make this legislation a reality. I would also like to recognise the Government Whip on the Bill Committee, my honourable friend, the member for Halifax, the Parliamentary Council, the many parliamentary clerks, staff and committee chairs who have run a tight ship to get this bill through the House. Sustainable aviation fuel is one of the key ways to decarbonise air travel. This bill will help drive our missions to help kickstart economic growth and make Britain a clean energy superpower, delivering on the government's manifesto commitment to secure the UK aviation industry's long-term future, including through promoting sustainable aviation fuels. The revenue certainty mechanism will help de-risk SAF projects in the UK by addressing barriers to investment in a nascent market using innovative technologies. Such a mechanism will help provide greater certainty of future revenue and attract investment in commercial-scale SAF plants within the UK. And on that note, Madam Deputy Speaker, I ask the House to support the Lords' Amendments 1 to 6 today.
The question is that this House agrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. With the leave of the House, I call the Minister to move that this House agrees with the Lords in their amendments 2 to 6.
I'd like to move, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that this House agrees with the Lords in their amendments 2 to 6. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. I'll allow a few moments if the Ministers wish to swap over.